order Callum Anderson to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms. House. I beg to move that this House has considered the motion regarding government support for retail investments, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairship. Let me start by thanking my honourable friend, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, for joining today and for her continued engagement on this debate's theme, and to all honourable members from across the House for making time for this too. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to raise the matter of retail investment in the UK stock market. This is more than just about the financial sector or the City of London, but it's about how people across our country, from Sunderland to Swansea and Buckingham to Bletchley, can build more secure financial futures whilst also helping the UK economy to grow. When people use their own money to invest in shares, in government bonds, or in other regulated financial products, that is a force for good. It gives them agency and an opportunity to own a stake in the companies that they work for, they buy from, and depend on in everyday life. At its best, it allows people from every corner of our country to share in the success of our economy, to grow their wealth, to build financial resilience, and prepare for life's great milestones, such as weddings, and unexpected moments. But retail investment doesn't just help individuals, it helps companies too. The capital that individuals invest provides the fuel for companies to expand, to innovate, and to create jobs in every part of the UK. That's good for productivity, it's good for wages, and it's good for Britain's international competitiveness. More individual investors also strengthen our financial markets. They bring more stability, deliver more liquidity to our capital markets, and provide a stronger base of support for UK quoted companies, making them more resilient to global shocks, be they pandemics or unexpected imposition of tariffs, and better equipped to focus on building their commercial offer. Now, the UK has a proud history as a global financial centre. We attract capital from across the world, and we should be proud to do so. But we used to pair that with high levels of retail participation from British citizens too. But sadly, that's changed, and the data paints a stark picture. In the early 1960s, individuals in the UK owned, by value, a little over half of all shares traded on the London Stock Exchange. Today, that figure is barely 10%. And at the same time, overseas ownership of UK shares has risen to almost 58%. What's more, according to studies from the London-based New Financial think tank, the proportion of UK households directly owning shares has halved in under 2 decades, from 22% in 2004 to just 11% in 2022. That's far below many developed countries such as Sweden, where over a fifth of households are owning shares. Now, there are many interconnected reasons behind these trends, and I do not propose to deep dive into each one right now. And of course, some people simply can't afford to invest, particularly when the cost of living remains high. Others feel that they don't know where to begin or don't trust the system to work for them. And many are simply more comfortable with cash, even though it often fails to keep pace with inflation.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
Yes, with pleasure.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way, and I wonder whether he would agree with me that increasing the participation of women in retail investment, women who make up more than 50% of the UK's population, is crucial not only for gender equality but for the economic resilience of the UK at present. At present, women in the UK are significantly less likely than men to invest in stocks, ISAs or pensions, despite often achieving comparable or better returns when they do. And that by addressing gender investment gap through education, accessible financial products and tailored support, we can empower more women to grow their wealth independently, reduce long-term financial inequality and boost the overall vibrancy of the UK retail investment market.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. She's quite right. It's really important that we encourage women and other underrepresented groups from investing and participating and owning a part of their economy. And I think it's, by encouraging retail investment, we are able to reduce a variety of wealth gaps, including the gender wealth gap. And I should actually also add that I think there's a social justice element too. People from middle class or wealthier families are simply much more likely to be exposed to the range of financial options available to them than those from ordinary working class backgrounds. That creates an asymmetrical divide in confidence, knowledge and opportunity. And Ms Hobhouse, this matters, because when UK citizens own less and less of their own economy, the consequences are much more than just financial ones. It affects the efficacy of our economic model, the shape and direction of our growth path, our ability to support homegrown innovation, and even, as we have seen in recent weeks, our very own economic sovereignty too. So if we want a strong economy that genuinely works for everyone, we must do what we can to help more of our constituents take part in it. Not just as workers or consumers, but as co-owners too. Again, I want to reiterate that this is not about helping the City of London again. It's about helping everyday people, our constituents, make the most of their money and have a say in the companies that are shaping their lives. Because we know that long-term investing consistently outperforms simply keeping money in cash savings or bonds. With pleasure.
Thank you. Thank my honourable friend for giving way. I recently met with representatives of Morrison's that is headquartered in Bradford, one of the fifth largest supermarkets in the country. Since 2021, they've been owned by a private equity firm. I wondered if my honourable friend agreed with me that we do need to make sure that we're retaining that family-owned British companies and that there is a risk when they're sold to private equity companies that it does undermine this sort of long-term patient capital and investment in our social fabric as well as in the businesses themselves.
Thank you. And I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. As I think I've mentioned probably ad nauseum since I've been elected, as my mum works for Morrison's, I know exactly the impact that various structures of ownership can have an impact on the workers and on customers too. And I think it is one of the many factors that she rightly explains we should be kind of considering as policymakers. With regards to the different varying impacts or outcomes from investing in different assets, a £100 investment in government gilts in 1900 would have returned around £463 by the end of the last decade, by 2019. But the same investment in UK equities would have yielded £35,000. But despite this, many Britons still keep the bulk of their money in cash. And within the G7, it is only Germany and Japan who are holding, the citizens of Germany and Japan, who hold more of their own national wealth in cash than we do. And inflation, even at modest levels, steadily eats away at that value. And I believe we must be doing more to help people feel confident in making smart, informed, long-term choices. And I think that starts with awareness, the right tools and advice, and trust. Let's take ISAs, the most commonly known product, for example. In the 2022-23 financial year, the latest official statistics are known, over 12 million adult ISA accounts were active. Yet nearly two-thirds of the total value, almost £290 billion, was held in cash. That's over £290 billion, earning very little return indeed. Now, some major banks, high street banks, which I will decline to name on this occasion, are at the moment of speaking offering as little as 1.35% interest on cash ISAs. Yet we know that inflation has consistently outpaced this rate for the last 4 years, and indeed has sometimes reached double figures. Now, many financial experts and advisors will rightly often recommend people keeping 3, 6, 9 months of living expenses in cash savings. And I know from my early career in financial inclusion charities that for many households in our constituencies, saving or even possessing even £500 in emergency savings can often be out of reach. So let me be clear again. This debate is not about replacing or discouraging cash savings, far from it. It's about showing that even small amounts of investment, £10, £20, £50 per month, can make a real difference over time. And if more people invest, then our economy will be stronger in the long run. Because imagine if we can shift even just 10 or 20% of that £290 billion towards more productive, growth-inducing assets. That will mean more companies starting, growing and scaling right here in the United Kingdom, which means more jobs, better pay, and more people gaining that crucial bit of additional disposable income to invest themselves or, perhaps just as importantly, enjoying life with their families. That is the virtuous cycle, I believe, we all agree that we need to be building. So how can we, Parliament, government, regulators and the industry themselves, go about working towards this together? Ultimately, I believe that the UK would greatly benefit from a long-term retail investment strategy, which is invested by Parliament, government, regulators and industry. And I think there are, for the purpose of this debate, 4 immediate priorities. First, I do believe we need to simplify the ISA framework and reform it to better support British investment. There are 4 types of ISAs today, all with variously slightly different rules. Now, for many, that is simply confusing, I think off-putting. So why not consolidate these products into a single ISA product, where stocks and shares ISAs are perhaps the default, but people can still crucially hold cash if they choose. Government might also wish to consider undertaking a review into the stamp duty framework on share purchases. For it is currently cheaper for an individual investor to buy shares in Illumina than Oxford Nanopore, Lockheed Martin than BAE Systems, and Tesla than Rolls-Royce. It's at time, I wonder, that we ask ourselves whether we want to continue making it more expensive for Britons to buy British. And finally, on this point, we should ensure that ISA tax exemptions align much better with the needs of the UK economy as a whole. For today, someone can put or invest £20,000 inside a tax-free wrapper that invests in companies which create no jobs in the UK, pays nothing into our exchequer, generates no domestic growth, and contributes no intellectual property or research and development. Again, should we as legislators be asking ourselves whether this is a good use of taxpayer subsidy? Is it time to look again at the original PEP, or Personal Equity Plan model, introduced by Nigel Lawson in the 1980s, requiring at least 50% of the ISA allowance to be directed towards UK-focused assets? That, to me, could strike a better balance between supporting investment freedoms and choice and the national interest. Second, we must boost and embed and entrench the virtues of financial education. Because if people don't understand how investing works, they simply won't do it. Now, I welcome the government's continued support for the FCA's review of the boundary between financial advice and guidance. It is really, really important that people can get timely, affordable help when making big financial decisions so that they can make the most of their money. But I think there is scope for us, for Britain, to go further. Because let's be honest, as I've said before, earlier in my opening remarks, kids from wealthier backgrounds are more likely to hear about compound interest and investment portfolios and ISAs at the dinner table than those from less wealthy families. And that's why financial education should form part of everyone's life, from school right through to retirement, so that people feel confident and well-informed at every stage of their life. And I think that means recommitting ourselves to properly implementing age-appropriate financial education throughout our school system, from basic budgeting and saving at a young age to more sophisticated learnings around investment, risk and long-term planning in their later school years. This is not just about economics, it's about equity and fairness. Third, we do need to make it easier for citizens to engage with the companies that they invest in. I believe that means primarily finishing the work of Sir Douglas Flint's digitisation task force at pace, ending paper share certificates and creating a fully transparent, modern shareholding system. But it's also about access to information. Right now, only the big top-tier institutions get first-class research. Retail investors get patchy websites filled with jargon, if anything at all. We should be developing, as the UK, high-quality, accessible investment information, especially for those smaller UK firms that have the potential to be the Googles and Nvidias of tomorrow. And fourth, and finally, we must fundamentally shift the British culture and mindset into individual investing. Too many people in our constituency still see investing as something that other people do, something for the wealthy to do, or the experts, or the lucky. I believe that we simply must challenge head-on that mistaken perception. So why not relaunch a modern, compelling, inclusive public awareness campaign? A 21st century version of Tell Sid, perhaps. It should focus on real people, real lives, and real, genuine, tangible benefits that people can see in their local community. And it should be visible too, in universities, in job centres, in community places, and in our workplaces. Because this isn't just about a personal finance issue, it's about a national opportunity. Mr. Alpaz, I will conclude now. I think the case for retail investment is clear, and I believe that this Labour government has the chance to fuse its democratic socialism with a modern brand of democratic capitalism. By helping more people invest in their own economy, we empower citizens, we grow our companies, and we build a more prosperous country for everyone. I believe that capital markets can and should serve everyone, and I think it is our job in this place to make that a reality. Thank you.
I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in this debate. The question is that this House has considered government support for retail investment. Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairship, and I congratulate my honourable friend for securing such an important debate and for covering so comprehensively and so vividly the challenges in the retail investment sector. When I speak to people across my constituency about what the challenges they face, and particularly when I speak to entrepreneurs, often it is that lack of financial education in schools that comes up, a lack of confidence. Too often, though, in rural infrastructure is also brought up to me. And as the MP for a highly sparsely populated seat, I'll focus my remarks in part on that, as well as on some of the more relevant points to retail investment directly. One of the things that I have met with local businesses about, such as the Allendale Brewery, where I managed to get in over recess, was a lack of targeted support, not just for retail investment, but targeted support for entrepreneurs in rural areas to make sure that their business ideas could be brought to completion. Grants that were relevant to more urban areas, support that was relevant to more urban areas, simply did not exist in those more rural areas where, to be honest, the jobs that are provided through such investment can have a transformational impact on a small village, simply due to the fact that a couple of jobs created there will have a far more kind of combined cumulative effect than simply those in cities. I also recognise that while we're talking about banks and about large financial services, the withdrawal of those services and of those organisations from rural communities is something that is incredibly worrying, that is incredibly damaging to people starting their investment. They're not able to see anyone with that knowledge, with that ability to provide advice. They're also unable often to go to those institutions for life's expected or unexpected moments. And at the moment, there's a likelihood that if the proposed Lloyds closures across Hexham constituency go through, there'll be very few bank branches in my constituency, which represents a major challenge. It's one that I've raised in the German debate shortly after I was elected, so I know the Minister is very much aware of my position and views on rural bank branch closures, but I won't miss an opportunity to raise it. I'd also like to quickly raise an issue brought to my attention by the Vintage Hub, one of a fantastic business in my local constituency, owned by Lisa and Douglas, who saw a 40% rent increase from Advanced Northumberland, an arm's length body of Northumberland County Council, which simply was not sustainable. And again, one of the issues that I see constantly is a lack of appropriate infrastructure, of rents being hiked up, driving people out of operating what are often commercially viable businesses. And I know that the Vintage Hub is a very successful business, but the block they rent from saw 3 forced to leave that unit because of the rent rise inflicted on them by an arm's length body of Tory-run Northumberland County Council. I think we need to make sure, and I'm sure the Minister will be listening to this, that we develop a financial services growth and competitive strategy that doesn't just prioritise retail investment across the country and restoring our high streets across the country, but one that takes into account the unique circumstances of local communities and of getting that kind of long-term patient capital into communities that otherwise would not necessarily represent, that have been left behind in the past. I'm thinking of smaller villages across the Tyne Valley. I'm thinking of areas that have been forgotten about for far too long. And where there are consistently to-let or for-sale signs on what are prominent, attractive high street shops, and encouraging that kind of development and how we can best deploy retail investment capital into those is a major part of what I hope the government look at going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hobhouse. It is a privilege to speak with you and the Chair, and it's a particular privilege to follow my honourable friend who's secured this debate and led it with expected expertise, because I know he brings to it a great deal of professional background from prior to being in this place too. And it's a privilege also to see the Economic Secretary to the Treasury in her chair, because I know she also brings vast expertise and experience from both this place and prior to it to this debate. And for those reasons, I will humbly keep a short focus on 5 particular segments of potential retail investors in making my remarks. I think my honourable friend from Buckingham and Bletchley is very accurate in noting that the focus for me in the Vale of Glamorgan, and the focus for him, and I know many other colleagues, is on ensuring not just those who can accumulate prosperity, but fundamentally on those who can ensure dignity through retail investment. And that is the first segment of particular interest to me in the Vale of Glamorgan, because it's the case that for millions of households, retail investment will be indeed a question of saving up for a rainy day. And for many of those households up to, say, the 3rd decile by wealth in this country, with an average net financial saving of £1,500 or so, the path to retail investment is through a low-cost or in some cases, hopefully even a zero-cost accessible money market or index fund. And I think the fundamental focus for those individuals is on how we support not just the right level of interest rate provision from our retail banks, which is absolutely necessary, but also the advantages of technology in distributing index funds in a way that is accessible and understandable to many of those households. There's a second category which is novel in its composition, which is the young in particular in this country, because whilst it's the case that about 39% of people, adults in this country, have invested actively, overwhelmingly about a third of those started for the first time during the pandemic. And the vast majority of those who started in the pandemic and afterwards were in the age category of 18 to 34. The patterns of behaviour in that category are radically different to others across the country. If you look at 18 to 24-year-olds, for example, 58% of them hold cryptocurrency as their primary asset holding, whereas if you look at the category of 55 to 65, actually the holdings are negligible in that particular asset class. Cash ISAs are not particularly prominent for those young individuals at the moment. And so for them, the interesting and salient question is how we make sure we have a bridge to a wider responsible investing across asset classes, building for the long term, alongside doing the thing that they might want to do in holding cryptocurrency or other assets as well. There's a third category, which is fundamentally, I think, critical to the nation's future and private investment in this country, which is the category of those who don't invest in equity today. My honourable friend has come up with a series of very practical, good ideas in supporting them into equity markets. But it also feels to me that pensions will be the primary means through which most people, given most of our financial assets up until the 7th or 8th decile of wealth, lie in pensions, not in direct financial assets themselves. Pensions will be the primary gateway to ensuring that retail investors have a bit more of a say in allocation, and ultimately an allocation that supports the long-term goals as a country. It's interesting there that I think in the United States, a 401 culture of people being able to exercise discretion in what happens with their pensions has led to a very radical shift in retail holding in equities in particular. And I know that the Minister has been at the frontier of making reforms to our pension system in her prior role and now as well. But it feels to me that in addition to supporting funds shifting their allocation, really pushing ambition on the implementation of the pensions dashboard and in the movement to open pensions, the data, the transparency and the empowered control that ultimately will help many of us make greater moves into supporting British and wider businesses is fundamental. Of course.
Thank you. You make excellent points there about the older generation and their decision-making about what to invest in. At the moment, older people are often over-saving, particularly in cash ISAs, or very low-risk products, in particular because of the lack of funded social care, and they are having to sort of hold on to a lot of cash for that sort of just in case they're going to need to pay for care. So would my honourable friend agree with me that there's better advice needed for pensioners to make these sort of retail investment decisions and a better range of products available that will deliver them both that security in old age in terms of social care, but also the income returns in terms of pension income?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know my honourable friend from Shipley speaks with a great deal of expertise in both this particular matter and the wider question of how we support people through their care needs over the lifetime of individuals as well. I think that's exactly right. And the thing I'd be interested in is how we support a market in the advice context, which goes all the way from what I think the guidance on the boundary of the advice market will do, which is support people getting into the advice context in the first place and ultimately into the regulated part of that market. And I think, again, as a fervent believer in what reduced cost of delivery through technology can do, I think there's a huge amount of progress to be made in finding different sources of advice for different sets of people. So I think pensions are a primary point of leverage for as we think about where we can make a mark in supporting greater retail investment. There's a fourth category which I think is a really important category, and that is the category of those who invest in equities but don't invest as much in British equities. I think it's worth distinguishing that from those who don't invest in equities altogether. And my broad suggestion there would be that we focus as much on the pull as the push, i.e. we think as much about why it is that when people in Britain are investing in equities, they're not investing as much in British equities. And in particular, it's very clear that North American funds have had very material inflows over the course of the last decade. And if you compare that to actively managed UK funds, they've had outflows since 2016. If you look at UK-based indices funds as well, they've had outflows in the last 2 years prior to 2023. As well, and I think it's probably not surprising that it's in large part down to the returns profile. If you invested in the MSCI US, you got a 303% return over the last decade. In the MSCI World, it was 213. If you look at the pattern of retail investment in US companies as well, it is the highest growth, highest returning, and often, in some ways, the highest engagement companies that get the greatest sense of inflows. 30% of retail holdings in the top 7 magnificent 7 tech stocks, as they're labelled, radically lower in the rest of the S&P. And I think it's probably not a surprise, therefore, that Britain, where the median age of our top 10 companies in the FTSE is about 150, compared to 40 on the US top 10, that people aren't feeling as captivated by the possibility of investing in Britain. So I think it is fundamental when we think about retail investment in British assets in particular that we think about what we're asking people to invest in and making sure that the wider set of economic reforms that we're focused on are driving at pace a sense that technology, renewable energy, those things that are really building the country's future, grounded in communities like Hexham, like the Vale of Glamorgan, that those are the assets that we're supporting people to invest in. And then the final point, which is the point which is close to my heart as a Labour politician, and that is that the retail investor's primary experience of a company is the company that they work in. And there is a cause here which ties together the cause of worker dignity, worker engagement, and retail investment for prosperity. And it is a particular cause that is close to my heart from the technology sector, because in many ways, one of the things that has been most remarkable about it globally has been the ability of the technology sector to create prosperity through employee stock ownership. And I would humbly put forward a suggestion that we look in the government at the possibility of adapting a very successful enterprise management incentive scheme already for employee stock ownership and make that more attractive and adapted to the modern world of technology companies and artificial intelligence companies by looking at the specific design of it. Ms. Hobhouse, I'm conscious that I've whittled through those 5 categories, but at the heart of it is a fundamental focus, which is that I think in the Vale of Glamorgan and across the country, in supporting both the prosperity and dignity of people in our constituencies, retail investment will be a fundamental focus and a way of building what I think we're all trying to do. Thanks very much.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I can start by being a little bit off topic, this is my first opportunity to congratulate you in person on your heartwarming reunion with your family. So congratulations on that. It was delightful to see over the Easter weekend. May I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Buckingham and Bletchley for securing this incredibly important debate. As the Honourable Member highlighted at the beginning of the debate, here in the UK we have a history but also a status as an important home being a global financial centre. And here in the UK, we have a reputation for being very strong at securing international investment, but domestic investment has never always been quite as strong. And the domestic investment that we do have is often propped up by the auto-enrolment into pensions, and that masks the fact that UK wealth in company stocks are the lowest in the G7, and as honourable members have highlighted, are lower now than they used to be. The net effect of that is that individuals are missing out on financial returns, they're missing out on having a stake in our economy, and companies too are missing out on investment. And the kind of result of that as well is that it means that many companies are choosing not to list here in the UK and are listing elsewhere in other countries where they can secure higher valuations and more capital investment as well. I think other members have rehearsed some of the reasons for this. There are some individuals who feel that they can't afford or they just can't afford to invest. Others are risk averse. There are those who lack the knowledge or confidence about how to invest. Some choose to invest in property. As we know, house prices and building prices in this country continue to go up and up and up, and that often means that people choose to invest in that. And as other members highlighted, often people are saving for a rainy day. And I do think that with our public services remaining on their knees, increasingly individuals and families are saving money, whether it's for social care, knee operations, private education and healthcare assessments or mental health appointments, whatever it might be. And so clearly getting our public services back on their feet will help people to feel as though they have confidence in our public services and don't have to be paying out where they should be relying on public services instead. We've seen many moves by different agencies to address some of these problems. We've seen that the FCA is looking to offer more than just generic guidance on how to invest, and I think that is something that we can all welcome. Some banks are calling for a badging scheme to identify entry-level investment products. I think that's something that we could all welcome as well, particularly long-term, low-risk investments for those people who want to get going. And I think that a call for greater financial literacy is something that we can probably all in this room agree with, irrespective of our political party as well. And it is vital that we do more on all of these fronts because, as we say, people are missing out on financial returns, companies are missing out on investment, and they are choosing to go elsewhere. I was particularly interested with some of the recommendations and calls for action from the honourable member who secured this debate. I would wholeheartedly agree with his call for a long-term retail investment strategy, and I hope that the Minister, in her winding up, can say a little bit more about that. I would urge some caution around the call for simplifying the 4 ISAs. I think I would say a lot of individuals are fairly au fait with choice. I think choice in itself is a good thing. I think that people have more agency when they can choose between different products. And I would be wary about throwing the baby out with the bathwater because I think if there's more information available about the differences in different ISAs, then I think choice is a good thing. And I think increasingly what we can see is that people want to choose how they invest their money in terms of a particular sector, or they have a particular outlook on the world, whether it's a green investment or something that has an impact. And some people are willing to sacrifice a little bit of financial return if they feel as though they're using their money for a good cause. And so I would urge the government and colleagues to just reflect on that particular point. I would certainly be very interested in the calls for revisiting tax exemption so that we are incentivising people to invest in those companies that genuinely do contribute to building Britain and building the British economy and providing more secure jobs. And in addition to the financial literacy, this call for a campaign to effectively democratise investment, I think is a really good idea, and we Liberal Democrats would certainly be keen to hear more from the government on that point. I think in terms of green investment, we know that there is a green stocks and shares ISA. The government has talked about a social impact investment vehicle, and it would be interesting to hear whether the government has more to say on that particular announcement, perhaps before we get to the spending review. I would urge the government to think about tackling crypto scams. We're now seeing warnings almost on a weekly basis about some of the scams in this area, and we would like to see the government do more to tackle this, especially on social media platforms, and to make a guarantee that in any future Trump trade deal, those kind of protections would not be watered down. And of course, we need to see greater stability more generally. I would urge the government to look at the issue of having more long-term responsible investment opportunities for individuals. I think at the moment a lot of people's confidence in retail investment might be a little bit shaken because of global headwinds and the geopolitical situation that we face. But nonetheless, there's still a very strong argument for that longer-term investment and the rewards that that can provide. Just finally, and a comment to the Minister, and I say this in the spirit of constructive opposition. There are lots of rumours flying around at the moment about whether and how the government may change various ISAs and whether they're looking at a particular cap, and that has created a little bit of uncertainty. Certainly I've heard from a few constituents who are anxious about what the changes might be and what it might mean for them, and I think we would all want to make sure that our constituents are well informed and don't take rash decisions because of rumours that they've heard. And so I would just urge the Minister, if there's anything that if the Minister is able to provide by way of assurances that whatever plans the government may bring forward will be phased in and that people have no cause to panic or be anxious about what may change, I think such reassurances would be well received by some of our constituents. Thank you, Chair.
Opposition spokesperson Mark Garnier.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your leadership, Mrs Hobhouse, and can I congratulate you on this being your first Westminster Hall debate as a member of the Speaker's panel. You've handled it masterfully. Can I also congratulate the member for Buckingham and Bletchley, who secured this date? I believe he was previously working in the London Stock Exchange, and he'll possibly interested to know that I started my career in investment 27 years of investment as a dealer on the floor of the London Stock Exchange in what we like to refer to as the olden days. But I think there's going to be probably almost unanimous outbreak of agreement across the floor. I think the member for Buckingham actually made some very, very important points. There's one which I slightly disagree on, but basically he could have written my speech. I think one of the things he mentioned was the idea of acclimatising people to the idea of investment. And when I was first elected as an MP, a number of us spearheaded a campaign to get investing in financial education into the national curriculum. Now, at the time, it was clear that too many young people were leaving school without any understanding of the basics of personal finance, let alone the potential of sensible long-term investment. So whether that's saving for a rainy day or putting away money to buy a home, making the right investment choices are, of course, absolutely vital. And retail investment absolutely should form a cornerstone of any investment strategy. Yet not enough people are aware of the long-term benefits of stocks and shares investments versus cash deposits. And polling conducted by Opinium last year highlighted that less than half of respondents felt confident about opening a stocks and shares ISA. And I've always felt that the lack of knowledge starts with the lack of the right education. When I was on the Parliamentary Commission for Banking Standards, better financial education was even recommended by the Parliamentary Commission on Banking Standards over a decade ago, a long time before many members here were elected. But in 2014, I thought we'd finally settled that debate about financial education in the curriculum. the national curriculum was updated to see financial education become a statutory part for the first time. But it has become clear, whilst it is still on the national curriculum, not enough focus is being made on getting schools to teach it consistently. And academy schools that don't follow the curriculum have no requirement to teach financial education if they choose not to. So I want to thank my honourable friend, the member for Mid-Leicestershire, who has recently taken up the baton. His private member's bill would make financial education mandatory for all students aged 5 to 18, which could resolve some of the issues that this debate is trying to tackle. And of course, things have moved on since my original campaign. It's clear that there is a real appetite for young people to become investors. Whilst the UK continues to lag behind countries like the United States when it comes to active retail investment, since the pandemic, as we've heard, interest in investing has substantially risen among younger age groups, particularly Gen Z, but partly this has been driven by crypto asset investment, which is something which I find a bit odd, if I'm being entirely honest with you. Younger investors aged between 18 and 24 are more likely than older ones to invest in crypto assets. And a survey conducted by the Financial Conduct Authority showed that 46% of young investors report holding cryptocurrencies, compared with just 7% of investors aged 55 to 65. And of course, they're influenced by trends they see on social media, such as TikTok, with cryptocurrency influencers bragging about fabulous returns. Of course, there are fabulous losses as well. But of course, the bedrock for financial education is the old adage, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. So I'm not against that, investment in crypto assets, but like any good investor, they should be seen as part of a balanced portfolio. Any young people who have an appetite for taking investment risk should know that they could be better served with investments into the stock market rather than the volatility of crypto trading. So I hope today the Minister will outline how the government intends to get our schools teaching financial education. Would she also confirm whether the government supports the principles set out in the Financial Education Bill, something that has had cross-party support? So online trading platforms have now made it easier than ever to become an investor. Yet despite the easy accessibility, the FCA's 2022 Financial Lives Survey showed that while over 15 million adults in the UK have investable assets exceeding £10,000, more than half hold at least 75% of those assets in cash. There are very good reasons to hold cash, particularly as people get towards retirement age or want to invest to buy a property or a car. And it is for that reason we on this side of the House believe it's important to retain the individual choice of how to use your tax-free ISA and keep its current allowance unchanged. And I think there is another important point about the cash ISA. This provides substantial capital for mutual societies, building societies, where they use that capital to then lend it on in the form of mortgages. If we reduce the level of the amount of money that can go into cash ISAs, we potentially starve, not excessively, but we reduce the amount of money that is available to the mortgage market. So we do have to think of this in a balanced way. But there are other ways we can focus the minds of people, helping them to make better investment decisions while retaining the flexibility to spend their ISA in the best interest of them and their families. The Investment Association has called for cash products to come with risk warnings in the same way as all financial products. This could be as simple as comparing the quoted saving rates against inflation, a point the member for Buckingham made. In this way, an investor would know that their investment could in fact be losing money in real terms versus inflation. Just as we rightly warn investors that markets can go down as well as up, we should also be honest that holding cash, while it may feel safe, risks steadily losing value through inflation. And the Investment Association has also suggested that renaming Stocks and Shares ISA to the Investment ISA could be a way of changing some of the mindset of investors. So again, I'd welcome the Minister's thoughts how we can highlight to investors the pitfalls of holding long-term cash. And a successful Hearts and Minds campaign could, according to estimates from Aberdeen, unlock £3.5 trillion of capital for markets if UK adults held as much wealth in investments as their US peers. But that clearly raises another question: how do we encourage retail investment into UK stocks and shares? If we are serious about encouraging long-term investment and wider public participation in the UK's capital markets, then we must take a hard look at stamp duty on shares, again a point made by the member for Buckingham. At 50 basis points, the UK has one of the highest rates of this kind of transaction tax in the developed world. We shouldn't be taxing investment in British businesses, we should be incentivising it. Stamp duty creates a direct disincentive to buy UK shares and disproportionately impacts those investing smaller amounts for whom every pound counts. It also reduces the attractiveness of London as a global listing destination and adds friction to the secondary market that ultimately feeds back into the cost of capital for UK firms. In short, stamp duty is a tax on growth, on participation and on financial inclusion. So we need to ask ourselves whether this levy, introduced in a different era, a very different era, still serves a useful purpose, or whether reform could help us unlock a stronger culture of long-term share ownership in this country. So I want to ask the Minister, again, would she consider it if whether this tax can be looked at again, particularly for retail investors? And as an idea, perhaps we could look again at how the ISA tax-free allowance could be incentivised to stay in the UK. So I was recently speaking with a successful investor, someone who makes full use of their £20,000 annual stocks and share ISA allowance. As you'd expect, they're shrewd with their money, putting it where they believe it will deliver the best returns. In recent years, that's meant investing primarily in the American markets, where growth has outpaced much of what's available or been available here in the UK. But what struck me was his comment he made a little later about his gardener. His gardener is on minimum wage and can only afford to put a tiny amount of money away each month into a cash ISA, if anything at all. Yet the gardener is effectively subsidising, through his taxes, a tax break that allows his employer to invest tax-free in overseas companies. That doesn't feel right. And again, it was a point made by the member for Buckingham. ISAs are a cornerstone of our savings culture, but if they're primarily being used to funnel capital abroad, then it's time we asked ourselves whether the current system is doing what we intended it to do. Perhaps it's time to explore how we can better direct ISA investment towards British companies. And again, I hope the Minister, or I'm sure the Minister, will be addressing that today. So I think we're all going to, I think we are all going to be in wholehearted agreement today on the need for more retail investment in the UK. The opportunity for investment into UK companies is indeed substantial if we can get this right. And I'm sure the Minister will have a plethora of ideas. She's writing them down ferociously as we speak now to respond. But we're very much looking forward to hearing what the Minister has to say. Thank you.
I call the Minister.
Thank you, Ms Hobhouse. And just to say it's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and congratulate you on your appointment to the panel, and thank you for presiding over this very good-natured Westminster Hall debate this afternoon. And happy Easter to everybody. I don't know about everybody else. It's the first day back from me from a nice Easter break, so I hope people got some rest over recess and lots of Easter eggs to boot. So I'd like to start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Buckingham Bletchley, on securing this debate. He brings great expertise to this House on this issue and on many others, but it's great to respond to his very thoughtful contribution, which I will come on to in a short while. He was right to draw attention to the benefits of retail investors to consumers and to the country as a whole. And as he has said, this is a win-win situation. If we get it right, it will benefit savers who will get better returns and bring benefits to British business by unlocking more capital to boost economic growth. But I'll come to the 4 points that he raised in a short while. Before I do that, I wanted to thank my honourable friend for Hexham for what was a very thoughtful contribution. He spoke about the lack of financial education, the lack of targeted support for entrepreneurs in rural areas, and like him, I want to ensure that our government, in its drive to increase economic growth, does that in a way that is inclusive growth and is growth across the country in urban and rural areas. I heard what he said about access to cash. I wasn't in the privileged position of being in this position when he did his adjournment debate on this issue, but if he wanted to meet to discuss this issue, I'd be happy to meet with him, because it's obviously something that is of real concern in his constituency. I wanted also to pay tribute to an excellent speech, as ever, from my honourable friend for Glamorgan, who talked about 5 different categories. I won't go through them all, but just to say I'm very passionate about the pensions dashboard, having worked on it in my previous ministerial position. I think this could really be game-changing in terms of ensuring that there is greater visibility. In what he rightly said, many people, even if they're not invested in the stock market, will be invested via their pensions, and it will give them much greater awareness of what they are invested in, what their likely pension income will be in the future, what they might need to do to top that pension up. So I was very interested to hear what he said about that. And Also, and I've got a piece in my speech about this, so I won't preempt it entirely, but what he said about North America and the culture of investing in North America, which I'll turn to at the end of my speech. I wanted to thank the Honourable Lady for St Albans. She started her speech rightly by saying that London and the UK are a very strong international financial centre, and we indeed do attract a lot of investment from international investors, not least international pension funds, but others as well. And that's something that we should celebrate. But she is right, and so was the Honourable Member for Buckingham and Bletchley, that we have seen, obviously, a decrease in the amount of investment from our own pension funds and our own investors in the UK, and that is worrying. I'd like to thank the Shadow Minister for his many, many questions that I am giving some thought to as I proceed with my speech. But he said something at the beginning of his speech which is absolutely correct, which is people think that there is a risk in investing in stocks and shares, but obviously there is a great risk, particularly in a high inflation environment. Not that we're in that high inflation environment right now, but we have been in recent memory where inflation got as high as 11%. In a high inflation environment, holding your savings in cash is not a risk-free option because that inflation will erode the value of your money over time. And actually, if you have some additional cash above the rainy day savings that the Honourable Lady talked about, then there is some merit in looking at what you might do to invest for the long term. And we heard members from across the House talk about long-term investing. Now let me turn to the speech of the Honourable Member for Buckingham and Bletchley, who at the start of his speech set out the scale of the challenge and also the potential opportunity here. As he has noted, the UK is an outlier compared to our international peers. He rightly talked about the UK being the third worst, I think, in the G7. I think that's probably the simplest way of putting it, in terms of the amount of money that people are holding in cash over everything else. So we are behind only Germany and Japan in terms of the amount of cash people are holding in savings. We know that there's a role for cash savings, don't get me wrong. But as I've said, we've got to look at what the balance here is between savings in cash and savings in equities and investing in equities. And that same research by Aberdeen also found that UK consumers have the lowest appetite for investing in the G7, which was very, very concerning. Many of us hold all or almost all of our savings in cash at the moment. The Financial Conduct Authority reported in 2023 that almost 12 million consumers had over £10,000 in investable assets held mostly or entirely in cash. And of that group, over 5 million indicated some appetite to invest. And I suppose our job in government, and indeed as parliamentarians, is to see what could the government do and what could we do to encourage people or to give people the confidence that they need to take that first step into investing. And of course, the government understands that people need cash savings for a rainy day buffer, and many of us will have some of those. I lost my seat in 2019 and I did have a cash buffer at that time, thankfully. But beyond that, there are risks of holding more savings in cash given the impacts of inflation in the way that I've already suggested, and indeed the opportunity cost of holding that money in cash savings when there are higher returns to be had from investing, particularly investing in the long term, if that is something that is open to individuals. The government wants to see more people take part in capital markets. So I think the Honourable Lady talked about democratising capital markets. I like that phrase. I think that would be a good thing that we could all agree on, and the benefits from the returns and long-term financial security that investing in such markets can provide. And to make that happen, we need to build a stronger investment environment in this country, and indeed to build a better investment culture that helps people engage confidently with investing. So my honourable friend made 4 policy suggestions in his speech, and I will turn to these in turn, and these were mentioned by other honourable members too. So first, my honourable friend called for reform of the ISA system. There was some debate here across the House, I see, and there's mostly some cross-party support, but here it's nice to see that there was some discussion and disagreement, a constructive disagreement between the Liberal Democrats and my honourable friend about ISAs. He suggested that we should consolidate and simplify ISAs, and the Honourable Lady suggested that we should keep the choice available to those. We said in the spring statement very clearly we're looking at options for reform to ISAs that get the balance right between cash and equities. I cannot comment on any tax changes or changes to the ISA or savings landscape today, but I will say to the Honourable Lady that we will take representations very seriously into account. As I've said now for the third time, I think, in this speech, obviously cash savings play an important role to ensure that people have that financial buffer in case something goes wrong. Oh, she wants to give way. Go ahead.
I'm very pleased with the Minister. I do recognise that she won't accept my invitation to divulge more information about the government's thinking on this issue, but I would be grateful if she could at least confirm that the government's position is that they're not ruling out maybe a phased approach to introducing whatever the government may introduce. I just think it's very important that our constituents who are anxious and worried about their money and what they should be doing with it, who are currently consulting financial advisors and whatnot, are given the reassurance that they need that whatever changes the government introduces may well be phased in a way that makes it easier for them to make decisions, so they shouldn't be making snap decisions now.
Well, I've heard her representation, and I'm sure that people in the Treasury hear that representation. Well, I would mention to her more broadly that we have committed to one fiscal event a year rather than the 2 or 3 that we might have seen. We might have got a third one in September had we not had an early election from the previous government. So I hope that gives her some reassurance. The Honourable Gentleman mentioned the issue of building societies, which he also raised in the House with me in Treasury questions. I am in close touch with the building societies. I will be speaking at their conference in Birmingham. He might too, as a West Midlands MP, I don't know. But I can reassure him that we're in close engagement with them, and we absolutely understand and appreciate the valuable role that they play in providing mortgages and other financial assistance to their members. And many of us in this place will be members of different and have investments in different building societies. Yes, of course, yeah.
I'm very grateful to the Minister. Constituents of mine really value the role of the credit union, the Bradford Credit Union, in particular for small savers on low incomes. I wondered if you saw a role too, alongside building societies, for credit unions in helping sort of encourage first of all saving, but then also, as we've been discussing today, making those early steps into investment, perhaps some of our poorest constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hobhouse. Thank you so much for that intervention to my honourable friend for Shipley. Yes, look, we think that credit unions, mutuals and cooperatives play a hugely important role in our economy and our society, which is why the government, as you'll know, given she stood on the same manifesto as me in the Labour manifesto, promised to double the size of the mutual sector, which is why at the Mansion House speech in November, the Chancellor asked the FCA and the PRA to look at the mutuals landscape, and why also we have supported the setting up establishment, and I went to the first meeting actually of the Cooperatives and Mutuals Council. So absolutely credit unions play an important role, and as she said, they play an important role to encourage savings, particularly for those on low incomes. We've also launched a consultation on the common bond and whether that needs to be more flexible so that more people can benefit from credit unions. So that's something that is also in train. Coming back to the issue of ISA reform and the considerations thereof, the Honourable Lady for St Albans rightly raised that there has been some market volatility in markets recently. I will not be commenting on the day-to-day movement in markets, but what I will say, and I think she was also making this point, is that over the long term, we've got to take a long-term view here. If people are in a position where they can invest in stocks and shares in our stock market or other forms of investment, that they need to take a long-term view of that, and often those returns, often that investment gives better returns than just putting something away into into a cash account. So I was just going to draw actually on the analysis by AJ Bell from February this year that suggests that someone who put away £1,000 in an average performing cash ISA every April since their introduction in 1999 would now hold about £34,000. If their savings had instead kept up with inflation, they would now have £38,000. So, and that person would have lost out over £4,000, as you see, 38,000 minus, so you got there first, which goes to show how inflation can reduce the value of cash savings over time. And in contrast, if that same individual had decided to invest in a stocks and shares ISA, they could now have around £83,000, over twice as much as their cash savings would have been. So I think that demonstrates that if you have the confidence and the ability, obviously we're not talking about everybody here, but the ability to invest for the longer term, you will get a better return, most likely, in the longer term. But we need to ensure that people have that confidence and capability to engage with investing and to benefit from the financial security and indeed the greater returns that investing can often provide. My honourable friend for Glamorgan talked about people who are on lower incomes. I just wanted to take that opportunity to say something about the Help to Save scheme, which is targeted at working households on low incomes and offers a 50% government bonus on savings of up to £50 a month over 4 years. And the government announced at the autumn budget last year that the Help to Save scheme has been extended until April 2027, and from the 6th of April this year, i.e., where are we now? A week before last, we've extended eligibility for Help to Save to all universal credit claimants in work as well. Now, let me come to the second issue. Gosh, I've got a long time, haven't I? I might be able to go the distance here. Let me come to the second issue raised by my honourable friend for Buckingham and Bletchley, which was about financial education. And in fact, most honourable members who spoke talked about the importance of financial education. And one of the major barriers to investing that consumers face is a lack of support to make financial decisions. We know that only 8% of adults received regulated financial advice in the 12 months to May 2022, 8%. But guidance does not often go far enough to help consumers feel confident to make a decision. We've got this big advice guidance boundary gap, and many of our constituents are therefore not getting the help they need to make their money go further. And some keep a lot of their money in savings, losing out on potential returns, and others do not regularly review their investments or invest in products that don't meet their risk appetite. So together with the FCA, the government is developing a new regime called targeted support, which would allow regulated firms to provide suggestions appropriate to consumers with similar characteristics. For instance, this regime would enable firms to suggest that an individual with substantial savings could consider opening a stocks and shares ISA. It would also enable firms to suggest options for how to generate an income from an individual's pension pot appropriate to consumers with similar needs. The FCA will consult on the rules that will underpin targeted support in the first half of this year. And getting these reforms right will help consumers make better informed decisions and help them engage in capital markets and ultimately be in a position to get better returns on their savings in the longer term. My honourable friend, the member for Buckingham and Bletchley, reflected on how financial education can help level the playing field from those from less wealthy backgrounds. And he's right here. I really like the way he expressed in his speech the asymmetries here between those who already come from a wealthy background, where this might even be discussed at the dinner table, and those, in a less privileged position who are not aware of some of these opportunities, and certainly would therefore, if they're not aware, they wouldn't have the confidence if they were given the opportunity. In England, the Independent Curriculum and Assessment Review is considering how to ensure the curriculum is fit for purpose, and indeed the Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Minister, talked about financial education and the importance of that. I can't give him any guarantees right now because, as he'll know, although we've had the interim report of the curriculum review, we are still working through some of the details. I met with my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-upon-Tyne North, and as the Minister for State for School Standards, to discuss this work and to make sure that the work that I am doing on financial inclusion and the work of the curriculum review go hand in hand. I can't give him any guarantees on private members' bills right now, but I'm sure we'll take that back to the government and indeed to the whips, who will tell me where we are on that. But as I understand it, the private members' bill isn't due to be introduced until the 11th of July, the one that he talked about in terms of financial education. We are working with the DFE, and the DFE is in fact working across government to look at how we ensure that the curriculum review does improve, well, I would like to see it improve financial education for our young people. And indeed, it was striking to see the interim review say that finance and budgeting is the top area. If you looked at the graph, which when they consulted parents and pupils, it was there that they'd like to see more focus in school. So that was very encouraging to see. The third area that my honourable friend raised was he was asking for action to make it easier for our citizens to engage with our capital markets. And indeed, the importance of UK capital markets was mentioned by many speakers, but in particular the Honourable Lady for St Albans and my honourable friend for the Vale for Glamorgan, and indeed, obviously, the Shadow Minister too. We want to make UK capital markets as attractive as possible to retail investors. Our capital markets are already among the strongest and deepest globally. I know there's been some concern raised, but in London last year, we raised, here, there was over £25 billion of equity capital raised, which is more than the next 3 European exchanges combined. So I'm very keen that we don't talk ourselves down. Of course, we've got to recognise challenges where they arise, but we've got to also recognise our strengths. And we are the world's largest international bond market with more than 16,000 active bonds traded on our markets, representing over £4.1 trillion across 55 currencies. And we want to go further in reinvigorating capital markets to ensure they support both UK and global growth. We're currently developing a financial services growth and competitiveness strategy, and we have identified capital markets and indeed retail participation within those markets as a priority growth opportunity in that strategy. That will be coming a little bit later this year. I'm sure the Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Minister, will be quizzing me about that in the weeks and months to come. And the government is focused on making our markets more competitive. This includes supporting the FCA's work to reform the UK's prospectus regime, which will give investors access to better quality information to support their decision making, and the FCA's proposals to cut red tape for corporate bond issuance, which will encourage companies listed on stock exchanges to offer bonds in smaller sizes, improving investment opportunities for retail investors. The government has also legislated to enable the FCA to reform the UK's retail disclosure regime, which will ensure consumers have access to the most useful information to support their investment decisions. The FCA's consultation has just closed, and the government looks forward to seeing their final rules later this year. My honourable friend for Buckingham and Bletchley also raised the work of the industry-led digitisation task force, which is looking at how we can improve the system of share ownership in this country and as part of how we can remove all paper shares. The task force is currently in the process of finalising its final report. He will have seen the interim report, and the government looks forward to receiving this and will set out its response in due course. Fourthly and finally, and very importantly, my honourable friend called for a fundamental shift in how we think about investing in our country. He's right to say that investing shouldn't be just for the wealthy or for those with expertise. We need to build an investment culture that enables newcomers to invest confidently and grow their financial resilience. I want to deliver that change, but I know that the government and indeed parliamentarians cannot deliver this shift on our own. We need to work closely with regulators and industry, and as my honourable friend suggests, make the case for investing to consumers. I thank my honourable friend for outlining his proposal on how we could do this. We are thinking very carefully about these matters and look forward to working with him and others across the House to help build that strong investment culture we want to see. And as part of that, we are, of course, looking at international examples, and the Shadow Minister mentioned the importance of this too. Honourable members will be familiar that in the US, Americans talk quite a lot, I'm told, about their 401k, and Australians talk quite a lot about their supers. In fact, I was talking to a financial services senior leader only a few months ago, and she told me that when she lived in Australia, her cleaner was often looking at her super on her phone and tracking her investment and the return on her investment. I would love to get to a situation where we saw that sort of inclusive, democratic access to our investment opportunities here in the UK. And I'm not being patronising, by the way. I have a fantastic cleaner too. I'd like to see her be in that position. We want to ensure that people across society get these opportunities. And we also want to see people engage with their pensions more closely, as I've already mentioned, in response to my honourable friend for Glamorgan. I've got about 20 minutes left now, I'm joking. I wanted to just ensure, and if I don't get to all of the honourable gentleman's questions, then I'm sure that we can write to him or we can have a discussion after the debate. My honourable friend for the Vale of Glamorgan talked about what the government could do to promote employee share ownership. And the previous government launched a call for evidence on the Save As You Earn and Share incentive plan schemes, and the government will use this call for evidence to consider opportunities to improve those schemes. I thank him for his interest in that. The Honourable Lady for St Albans talked about advertising on social media, and she'll know that under the Online Safety Act, large internet platforms will be required to put in place systems and controls to avoid fraudulent advertising appearing on their platforms. And we welcome Ofcom's work to bring forward codes of practice on what actions firms should be considering. But she's right to raise that as a matter of concern. It is something that the government is concerned about. I've answered the Honourable Gentleman's question about the private members' bill, but I'm sure that there were other questions that he asked me that I didn't quite get round to. So I hope he can beg his forgiveness, unless he wants to just remind me of the questions. It's all right, if you do that and they haven't got a chance to give me the answers, I don't know the answers. No, I'm joking. I did get his question about the private members' bill on financial education, and also what we can do together to ensure that people know that there are risks of holding cash as well above certain levels, and the erosion of inflation and people's cash savings. But if he wants to repeat any of the questions, I'm happy to. Yeah, please.
The Minister's covered most of it, but if we will, I'll review, and we can perhaps have a conversation later.
Such great cross-party. Don't tell anybody else about this, by the way. But really good to be working with the Honourable Gentleman. I remember fondly, well, not that fondly, being a shadow minister, and having very good, different working relationships with different ministers that I shadow. But I very much welcome the constructive way that he's going about this debate, and I look forward to debating with him on Thursday on the Banking Resolution Bill. In closing, Ms Hobhouse, let me just say I'd like to thank my honourable friend for bringing this debate to Westminster Hall, and also all honourable members who made speeches during what has been a very constructive and interesting debate, certainly from my perspective, and thank honourable members for their contributions. The government is determined to make the UK's retail investing environment more attractive and to boost the UK's investment culture. And I will reflect carefully on the points raised by honourable members in this debate. Thank you again.
Callum Anderson to wind up.
Thank you, Ms Hobhouse. I had no idea that this was your first debate to chair, and given that we've got 20 minutes, hopefully this is only starts a good track record for you for ending debates in time. Look, I'm really, once again, very grateful for the opportunity to be able to bring this debate to Westminster Hall, and for all the contributions from all sides of the political spectrum and their thoughtful, considered views. And as I said at the beginning, I also thank the Minister for her continued engagement and patience with me as I've brought this up again and again. I think there's clearly a lot of cross-party political consensus, and therefore a big opportunity for Britain to reinvigorate our capital markets, and as the honourable member, honourable lady member for St Albans said, to make sure that we can democratise share ownership. So I'd just like to thank again everybody for spending an hour of their time contributing to this debate.
The question is that this House has considered government support for retail investment. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 6 o'clock.